You're listening to the Staging Sips podcast with Lori Fisher. This podcast is dedicated to helping real estate staging CEOs build healthy businesses that grow, flow, and thrive. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Sips. I'm so happy to have you here. So today we are talking about grounded communication, which is communication when you're feeling emotionally neutral. Last week, we talked about boundaries and corporate boundaries, corporate policy setting. This week is all about how do we communicate those things and how do we communicate them from a place of feeling neutral emotionally. I think there's a lot in here that I would have loved to have had early on, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the podcast. But I also want you to stay to the end of the podcast because I have a great resource that I'm going to share for you, a plug and chug template that you can use right in your own business. So one of the most fascinating things about running a staging business is all of the humanity that we encounter, right? And in particular, we are experiencing humanity in relationship to their most private of space and most likely their biggest asset. It's a really interesting, delicate place to be when we're talking about communication. So as a result, we have all flavors of interactions with people. So we really need excellent communication skills from our company to our prospective clients or to our existing clients. And also because our industry is still relatively new, there's a lot that's really misunderstood about staging and how it happens. And this can come into play in your daily lives as well. So as I talked about in episode 5, there are definitely going to be times when you have clients who consciously try to push or cross your corporate boundaries that you're going to need to communicate with. But in general, what I have found is that most people are in one of a couple of camps. One is they just flat out forgot what they signed in the client agreement, right? So we see that. And, my client agreement is multiple pages long at this point after years in business and years of scenarios that have been encountered. So there's a lot to digest there, and a lot of people skim, a lot of people don't pay attention, even if you have them initial every single line. So that's the first camp. And then the other one is that, people don't know enough about how staging works, which leads them to request things that seem like they're pushing boundaries, like, can you install tomorrow? I'll give you a lot of business, so maybe you can give me a better price. You're more expensive than the other staging quotes I've gotten. We don't like the art in the mean bedroom. Can you come over and change that out before pictures, right? Like, I don't know if you've been in business long enough to experience these kinds of things, but if you are, you very likely will encounter them. But most of us hear things like that, and it can stress us the F out or just annoy us and leave us feeling devalued, and it leads us to create kind of thoughts that are maybe not productive. Like, are you being for real right now? Like, I always give my best price. No, you can't pick the furniture for your stage. Or do you seriously think I'm waiting around for your call just so I can install tomorrow? And believe it or not, like, those thoughts, no matter what words you put out into the world, your energy and your vibe will come through in those words. So we really need to begin to prepare and plan and reframe for scenarios like this. So what if the first thought I have for you off the bat is, what if some of these are just simply questions that people are asking to do their due diligence, or they're oversights because people are busy and they don't want to read a 20-page contract that closely? Like, what if that's just the case? And what if we answered from that mindset of neutrality and understanding and compassion that maybe they need more education, maybe they're not intentionally crossing the corporate boundary? And what if the actual words you said back weren't actually the most important part, but how you felt when you responded? Like, there's no magical words. I mean, there are some good words for sure, and there are certainly better words we can use to communicate our boundaries. But what if it really wasn't about the words and just simply about how we felt about the questions that were asked or the requests that are made? So The first step in grounded communications is really just separating our identity from the business identity. And I talked about this in episode 5 as well. This is really important, and it is going to be probably the central work that you have to do on your mindset in general as you grow your business. Because when we start out, like I always say, as a corporate directory of one person, everything can feel very personal. And these kinds of requests can feel devaluing if we don't frame them in the right way. So I'm going to say we, but I'm going to include myself in all of this, myself included, spend a lot of time acting as though the clients are doing something to us rather than just asking questions about the way our business operates. So when somebody says, "Can you install tomorrow?" We have to understand that there's been some misinformation out in the world by people watching staging shows on HGTV. I watched one maybe a couple of years ago and was just fuming because this was the exact scenario. The stager showed up one day, the install happened the next day. They happened to be wearing flip-flops during the installation. And I was like, oh my God, they clearly don't have insurance policies, or maybe their workman's comp is so good that their team is allowed to wear flip-flops while they install. It was like an outrage. But because consumers are learning about staging from those shows primarily, they're going to ask questions like that. And it's our job to communicate clearly and effectively why that's not going to happen for them, right? Again, we, myself included, are afraid to lose work or clients if they don't like the answer that we give them, right? So when we're choosing to enmesh ourselves in our business, like our communication with our business communication, we get afraid that we're going to lose a client. So, we don't honor our own corporate boundaries, right? So because we're afraid, we don't want to upset somebody and have them go run and find the next staging company that's out there to work with. We want them to work with us. So because we haven't prepared and planned for how we're going to communicate things like, no, it actually doesn't work that you choose the staging furniture. If you want to see how we operate, I'm happy to send you, here's our portfolio. You can see to make sure that we're a right fit for you. That is coming from a place of sufficiency and not scarcity that you're going to lose the client. And it actually brings your languaging into a neutral zone. And really, truthfully, as amazing as our businesses are, we aren't always going to be a want match with all clients. And a want match is they want a certain aesthetic, or they want a certain look, or they want a certain timeline or a certain date. And if we're not able to accommodate that, that simply means that we are not a want match. And also, if they want an emergency installation and that's not our business model, then they are not a want match for us. So we'll have a whole podcast dedicated to want matches. But that is essentially what it is. It's that kind of alignment between how you operate your business, what is your aesthetic, how do you approach a project, and is that a want match? Is that a right fit for the potential client? Not everybody's going to be a right fit for you. So anyway, all of that said, this is why we spend time creating corporate boundaries and policies. And if you didn't hear episode 5 about that, go back and listen to that, because that kind of walks you through how you can think about your corporate policies and corporate boundaries, and then some of the policies you might want to put into place. But detaching yourself from your corporation is only the first part of the equation. There are 3 other components to really solid, grounded communication. The first is deciding how you will communicate your policies ahead of time. And the reason that you want to spend time thinking about how you will communicate policies, whether that's around an emergency D stage, whether that's around choosing the furniture for a stage, what happens if your inventory becomes damaged or stolen while in a property, how do you communicate that? The reason we want to decide ahead of time is because it taps into your rational brain, but you can also develop your responses from emotionally neutral language, right? So sometimes when we've encountered a situation where our maybe our inventory, how about our team has been delayed because of conditions on the site are not viable for our team to be able to install, whether that's to access the property or whether that's because the conditions inside aren't great. We might want to call or text and be like annoyed that our team is sitting there, annoyed that we can't get in, frustrated, stressed because maybe our team needs to be somewhere else on the next installation, and this is now going to mess up the whole day and the logistics and all of that. So if you've decided ahead of time and you have actually developed and written out communication plans, you can simply just copy, paste, plug and chug, and communicate from your neutral brain, not your emotional brain. And here's the deal. It also doesn't have to feel super corporate. And the resource that I wanted to share with you is a communication template, a communication plan template, where there are all of the ways that we communicate from Rethink Home Interiors, our communication plans for several scenarios. And I'm giving that to you as just a fun freebie to have from this podcast so that you can plug it into yours, and you'll see that we have direct and neutral languaging, but we're also very much in our own kind of Rethink Home Interiors. We love exclamation points and emojis and happy and joy and all of that. But you'll see that in our communication plan, we're absolutely able to let somebody know that, if they've said we need an emergency D stage, you will see that we communicate in a really friendly way that lets them kind of put our client at ease, but also says, hey, we have to charge this fee, and you agreed to it essentially, so we're charging it. So that's why you want to decide ahead of time, and it takes your emotion right out of it. We also want to decide ahead of time if there are any exceptions to your policy, right? So I will be talking about this in a future podcast episode, but you can have some flexibility in your policies when you use something called client filters. And client filters are a way to sift and see if there is an exception that can be made, or if someone is a right fit for a particular service or policy or something like that. So, your client filters for this might be to create an exception. Are they a past client that values your team? And if that's the case, maybe you extend them, some grace in, if maybe a property is inaccessible, we'll keep with that scenario. If a property is inaccessible and this client has demonstrated across, several times that you've worked with them that they're always very conscientious and they try to get things done and they try to let you know, and they're communicative and they value your team and all of those things, and for whatever reason, this particular project has fallen through the cracks and they forgot to notify you, that might be a situation where you create an exception to the rule. Maybe they're a new client who just needs more education and a little grace, but they could be an amazing partner. Sometimes, especially I find investors, when they don't really know when the stager should come in, and if we haven't done a great job of communicating it, and even if we have, sometimes if they're running multiple projects, they can forget to communicate with us that a project isn't fully ready to stage or be accessed on installation day. The key to this, though, is that you want to make sure if it's a valued customer that you are extending some leniency toward, you want to let them know that you understand their scenario. You want to align with it. Like, oh my goodness, I'm sure you totally are, feel so bad, that our team is sitting here, we can't access the property. We're going to waive the reschedule fee or whatever fee it is there for that particular service or issue. We're going to waive it this time because, we totally value our working relationship and you've been an amazing client, and we know that sometimes things happen. And you want to do this because this engenders real brand loyalty when somebody knows that you have they've agreed to have a fee charge, but they're not charging it to you. It just is one of those things. I was going to go off on a tangent about a scenario with when I had something like that happen, but really just suffice it to say that puts a lot of goodwill in the world. The other client filters you might want to decide upon ahead of time is if there are exceptions for the policy and you don't want to make them. So are these clients typically a pain in the butt? Like, are they always causing issues and creating drama and make things difficult and always ask for special situations? That might be the client filter where an exception does not happen, right? So you really want to think about that ahead of time. When, in what scenarios would there be an exception, or when would there not be an exception and you want to move forward with it, especially if you're charging a fee, who gets that fee charged, whereas when might you waive it? So the last thing is, after deciding how you'll communicate ahead of time and are there any exceptions for your policies, is you really want to detach from the results of your communication. This is so much easier said than done, and it takes a bunch of practice, right? As business owners, we can't really spend time worrying about how every single person is going to receive our policies and communication, because as you get bigger and as you grow more, you just don't have the time to. And if you're going to operate from the brain and well, not the brain, but and yes, if you're going to operate from the brain of a company that is bigger, or from the perspective of a larger staging company who's busy and has an admin team handling or an operations team handling your issues, you just don't have time to worry about how every single person is going to receive your communication, especially if you are doing a nice job of just keeping your languaging not sounding punitive, but just sounding very neutral, right? You cannot worry about that, because we really do need to create some consistency in your business communication plans, especially as you add new team. Because if you are not always available on a case-by-case basis to troubleshoot, which is hopefully the plan, as we talked about in the podcast about the accelerate phase and the leverage phase of business, your job is to create the you not needed roles in your business. So you don't actually want to have to be available to troubleshoot every single scenario and see if somebody is an exception to the rule and all of that. You're going to need some consistency. So you're going to want to put into place communication plans as well as client filters if there's going to be an exception to any fees being charged. If your client's brain freaks out when you are going to charge a fee or change the scheduling date or whatever it is for one of your projects, if they get upset, those thoughts are their thoughts. They are responsible for them, not you. And there's not a whole lot that you can do if somebody is just going to decide that they're going to be upset by what you've done. We just need to resolve that not all clients are going to be a right fit for our business, and we're not going to be a right fit for them. So if you have decided ahead of time how to communicate and what the exceptions are, detaching from the outcome becomes a lot easier, because you have prepared people that you think are excellent partners, that there is this fee, they did agree to it, but you aren't charging it if you've decided that it's an exception. And if you have established that a client is routinely a pain in the butt client to you, then whether they leave or stay, actually leaving is probably the better option. Not working with your company is the better option. I know in the beginning that's hard. We want every client we can possibly, work with to work with them. But as a cautionary tale, I will tell you, as somebody who has had just a couple of difficult clients over the years, that when they decided that we weren't a right fit for them, and we kind of drew the line in the sand with our policies and enforced them, and they walked, it was so much better for our business, and it opened up the opportunity for way better clients in the future. So that is a lot right there. Okay. So you want to be thinking about that. And I do have that client, that communication plan that you can use for your own business inside of, in the side of the show notes for you to grab. So go ahead and grab that, make a copy for your business and run with it. But I want to give you some helpful thoughts too, because as you go about implementing these things, your brain is going to freak out on you until you get enough practice, right? Like everything in business is practice, and you have to think about it from the perspective of being a brand new beginner at maybe playing an instrument or a sport. You're not that good at it in the beginning. It takes practice and time. Same thing with the way your brain thinks about various scenarios. So let me give you, as I do in every episode, a couple of, sips, some helpful thoughts to sip on for your brain. So here's the first one. Most people are asking questions because they just don't know, and they are simply seeking information. This is a really good one. I remember in the beginning of my business, I would be so stressed out if somebody wanted like a stage tomorrow and I couldn't honor it, and I would freak out. And then finally, I remember the day that I had a conversation with a client where I said, actually, it would be amazing if that's how it could work. Here is how it works for our business. These are the steps that need to happen. And once we have, in the case of vacant stage, and once we have your signed client agreement and your payment, we're able to put you on the calendar. And that is typically 7 to 10 business days from that time. And the person said, oh, okay, that's great. Because they simply didn't know. That was like my epiphany moment. Like, it wasn't like they wanted it tomorrow. They just thought it was possible because they must have learned that somewhere, right? So they're just simply seeking information. Another helpful thought for you is our company policies are not punishments. So when you are creating a fee for rescheduling or an emergency D stage, what you are actually doing is you are helping to pay for the additional time and expenses that your company incurs as the result of that request or that issue. So it's not punishing the client, it's just simply asking them, or it's requiring them to pay for the additional work and time. Somebody has to pay it, and it really shouldn't be you if it was a scenario that was created or avoided. It could have easily been avoided on your client's part. You're not responsible for the fact that they didn't plan accordingly. You're not responsible to pay your team because of their actions or inactions, right? So your policies are not punishments. They're just, hey, we get it. Things happen. We have team to pay as a result of this. And here is what you agreed to in the client agreement. And it's not as though you haven't shared it with them in your client agreement already in most cases. Another helpful thought is honoring our policies helps us work with only the very best clients. And as I said before, I had difficult clients, and finally I just put my foot in the sand. We created a policy, we implemented it, we shared it with this particular client, and they no longer work with us. And it has been really, really nice ever since, because they just weren't a right fit for us, and we weren't a right fit for them. So, and we sent them off, lovingly, like, go find another company who's a better fit. We're not it. Another thought that you can have is we can be flexible with our policies in the right circumstances for the right clients to give them a wow experience and create more brand loyalty. This is, of course, I love this one. I'm a giver. I'm a pleaser. I love this thought that we can be flexible, right? We don't have to be punitive in anything. We can be clear and direct, but we also can extend some grace sometimes when we see somebody who is a really fantastic client who comes back to us over and over again, maybe refers us out to their colleagues and friends and family and things like that. We can show some grace and some latitude with those people. And that's a really good, warm, fuzzy feeling. So that's what I have for you today. Go into the show notes and grab your copy of the communication plan template that should give you a lot to customize and tweak for your own business and get your juices flowing for any of the other scenarios you may encounter in your business, and how to have a clear communication plan ready to go for those icky, sticky times in your business. So have a great week, a wicked good week, and I will see you next week on Sips. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Staging Sips podcast. If you love what you've learned here today, please take a minute to rate and review it so more staging business owners can find us. And if you want to learn more about how to market and grow your staging business more strategically, I'd love to see you join us inside of the Rethink You Accelerate mentorship program. It is open enrollment, You can get more details at rethinkhomeinteriors.com/rethinkyou. Would love to see you inside.